No, you're not. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying with us with no power, but we are going to make it work. We are going to do a LNC chair debate. All three of these gentlemen are running for LNC chair. I've got a couple questions to ask them and somewhere about an hour worth of content and discussion and whatnot. I'm going to open up to introductions, not introductions, excuse me. Well, yeah, introductions for each of the candidates. Just introduce yourself, a couple minutes speech, and then I'll get to the questions. I'm going to try and do about 7 or 8 questions, so keep it short, but keep it on point. And there can be a little bit of back and forth, but let's just try and move through it as we can. Rob, since you're closest, you can go ahead and start. Everyone else who's talking should go talk somewhere else, or stop talking and pay attention. All right, go ahead, Rob.
So what's up, everyone? I know you have no idea who I am. I'm Rob Yates, LPNC Comms Director, a large member of LPNC. And as I'm sitting here and dealing with chaos, which is, to be fair, part of life, right? I can't help but reflect on how sort of accustomed we become to the frills that life has given us: power, electricity, energy, Wi-Fi, internet. But it harkens back to the founding of our nation, right? A whole bunch of people, mostly very young, with a rebellious spirit who had no more patience for a tyrannical government. And they stood in halls like this with no lights, no power, no microphones, and yelled out to crowd passionate speeches to push back against the state. Since 1971, the Libertarian Party has stood as the only large organization dedicated to fight back against that power. Now, we signed the Declaration of Independence, 1776. Libertarian Party in North Carolina started in 1976. I'm running for chair to bring back that spirit of 76. It's time to get organized, time to put aside the petty, silly things that we fight about, and unite in solidarity against the real enemy, which is the state. So I appreciate you all being here. I appreciate any support you have. I will say, I know these two gentlemen, there's at least one other person running. Whatever happens at National, we'll be in good hands. But y'all know me, you see what I do, and I do believe I would be the best for it. So, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for allowing me to come here from Texas. My name is Wes Benedict, and I'm running for chair of the Libertarian National Committee. The Libertarian Party is very much needed right now. The Republicans and Democrats are doing terrible things. I mean, Trump is elected president, and he talked about not starting new wars. Now he's bombing Iran. We're for free markets and freedom and free trade, and Trump's #1 thing is to shake down as many countries as he can with his tariffs and threats of tariffs. And of course, the Democrats are very bad on every issue as well. California makes it so hard to build new housing that you either have to be a millionaire or you have to be poor and get subsidized housing, or you're homeless. They don't understand the basics of supply and demand and how free markets work. I served as the National Executive Director of the Libertarian Party for 8 years. It was from around 2009 till in 2018. I served as Executive Director of the Libertarian Party of Texas for 4 years. I think that my claim to fame is that I've recruited more candidates than anyone else in the entire history of the Libertarian Party, although I know Sean Haw has done a whole lot of candidate recruitment, and he might be close there as well.
Brad Hessel got you beat.
What's that?
Brad Hessel might have you beat.
Brad might have me beat as well, I don't know.
Sean has me beat.
Let's not interrupt.
I've recruited a lot of candidates in Texas, but also in Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Pennsylvania. One year we got 174 elected to partisan offices in Pennsylvania, and I did that from Austin, Texas. The National Libertarian Party is hurting. It's in better hands than it has been recently, but I've been the one who was the full-time staff. Had 14 people on my staff with me as executive director, and we made things work for 8 years. I know how to put things back together and bring us to new heights. So I appreciate y'all having me here, and thanks for all that you do here in North Carolina.
Jim Ostrowski from Buffalo, and forgive me for standing up, but I'm a trial lawyer and I'm trained to stand up when I'm talking, and besides people in the back of the room. So I drove in from Buffalo into your beautiful state last night, and it's an honor to be in the state where the Battle of Guilford Courthouse was fought on the Ides of March 1781, and that battle showed that militias actually are effective on the battlefield. President George Washington was wrong about that. And your fellow members of North Carolina State drove Cornwallis into what he thought was a safe haven at Yorktown. And you know the rest of the story of the victory of the Libertarian American Revolution. So it's an honor to be here. I've been in the movement so long that some of the younger people probably haven't bumped into me, but I've been in since '79. I knew Rothbard, he taught me economics. I knew Harry Brown, he was a friend of mine, and I helped him campaign. And I was Ron Paul's election lawyer when he ran for president in New York State. So I have a 19-page memo. I know we're not going to be able to get into all the details in a relatively short debate. All my reasons for running, statistics, background, resumes, they're all online on Twitter and X. But basically, I'm running because liberty is the greatest political idea in human history, but we have a bad strategy and we have bad marketing. And if I'm elected, I will start to fix both of those problems in the first month with very specific ideas, including, by the way, I'll close on this, we need a Libertarian Hall of Fame, because the American people don't know about the glorious history of the liberty movement. It goes back to, didn't start in 1971, the party started in 1970, and I'm not contradicting my friend, he knows this. The movement started in 1646. And basically we created the modern world and most of what's good about the modern world, but nobody knows this, it's a big secret. So if we put a Libertarian Hall of Fame brick and mortar up, probably in Philadelphia, we can begin to fix that marketing problem. Thank you.
I didn't come up with an order ahead of time, so why don't we just go back and forth with the questions. So Jim, this one is going to be for you first to answer, but it's going to be the same question for all three, and I can read it again. Again, just try to keep it 3 minutes tops, so we may drop on these questions, but just so we can get through them. All right, Jim, the Libertarian Party constantly wrestles with its identity. Are we a political machine built solely to win elections, or are we an education organization meant to shift culture? As chair, how would you direct the party's limited resources between these two philosophies?
Well, I'm running because 50 years at 1% shows that politics is rigged. It doesn't work the way we're doing it. What does and can and will work is direct citizen action. Took me 35 years in politics to realize that direct citizen action is the way to go, and I've been preaching it for about 15 years. That's why I'm running, really, because I wanted to explain this idea to people and get people on board with it. So if we do direct action, such as voting with your feet, such as what's happening in New Hampshire, but making that into a national party principle. Voting with your children, pulling your children out of government school, voting with your health, walking 7,500 steps a day. You could lobby all you want in the state capitol here, and state capitol and all the other places, or Washington, to change the medical laws, regulations, and so on. It's not going to work because the lobbyists have it all locked up. But so we can do direct action. We can actually cut healthcare costs in half, and half of healthcare costs, which is 17% of GDP, are paid for by the government. So if we take this different approach that will work and has worked in history, we can. What I want to do with the Libertarian Party, shift gears a little bit. The Democratic Party's in the election business. The Republican Party's in the election business. The Libertarian Party should be in the liberty business. And the one way we can increase liberty is using direct action. We could still do the political stuff, and through direct action, such as teaching economics, we will create a more receptive public to when we run candidates, because the main reason that people vote against us is they don't understand economics. And nobody else is teaching it, so I think the Libertarian Party should. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna stand up like he did. He's a trial lawyer, so he probably knows what he's talking about. Is the Libertarian Party a political party or an educational organization? When y'all are all ready to listen to me and do exactly what I tell you to do, then I'll tell you what to do. But I think in the meantime, I think you're gonna be free to do what you want. There are people in the Libertarian Party that like to run for office, that like to recruit candidates, that like to, some of them like to win elections that are local offices, and some like to run for Congress or governor, where we know it's unlikely they might win, but they're going to do a lot to get issues out there. They can talk about how the Republicans say they're for lower taxes, but they keep raising taxes, they keep growing the budget. I live in a Republican county, in a Republican state, in a Republican nation, and my taxes are way too high. They're growing faster than population and inflation growth. And I'll tell you, I'm a lobbyist. My daytime job, I work for an organization that lobbies for housing and electricity reform to increase the supply. We got 4 bills passed last session, but you know what? There was about 1,000 bills that passed. They're passing bills, bad bills, way faster than we can pass good bills. They're certainly passing bad bills and electing bad politicians faster than our local elected officials can change things. So we need to be an organization that recruits and elects candidates and wins when we can, but we also need to run candidates for president, governor, and Congress that do a lot to educate the public on the policies and put pressure on those incumbents and embarrass them. Embarrass them in debates, on televised debates, online, in surveys you fill out, whatever it is. So we're going to do both, and you are going to do whatever you want to do because you're a libertarian.
So I guess I'm sitting to Jim if my knees are shot after this. So there are a few core conflicts that we struggle with in the Libertarian Party. Some of the key ones that come to mind: does pineapple belong on pizza? Who's a real libertarian? Minarchy versus anarchy, always a favorite. And then, what is the purpose of the Libertarian National Committee, the Libertarian Party? Is it to advance liberty, or is it to win legislative and electoral success? And I actually think that's a false conflict. I've written extensively about this, and I'm sure everyone here reads my newsletter, right? The difference between us and the Uniparty is that for the Uniparty, electoral success is the terminal objective. There's no principle, there's no policy they're trying to get passed. The platform can be changed at any point in time because some demagogue comes along and says, no, now we hate free trade and love bombing other countries. They will say, do, and spend whatever it takes to gain power, to win elections. On the other hand, we are bound by principle. The difference for us is the terminal objective. Our goal is liberty. We are not beholden to the people with purse strings, the people buying that power. We're beholden to the liberty movement. So the ultimate goal of the LNC is, of course, to advance liberty. However, there are many ways to advance liberty. The LNC and the party exist as the way to advance liberty through electoral and legislative success. And so we should be focused solely on that And if there are other avenues or vehicles to advance liberty outside of electoral success, we should either not be wasting any resources on spreading ourselves too thin, or we should be spending resources to support other movements that are doing a better job than we can by being spread thin, so that they can succeed. Groups like You're the Power, for example, doing wonderful things is not part of the LNC, and there's a very specific reason for that, and to me that's the nature of a decentralized approach.
All right, Rob, you just mentioned that the LNC doesn't have necessarily the job to do all the pretty things, but it has to do some of the infrastructure stuff. So, many state parties, let's say, feel like National basically treats them like an ATM sort of, where they take volunteers and they take money, but they don't offer much back to the state affiliate. So what would you say the role of the National Party is when it comes to providing support to state affiliates?
So this is maybe the most important question you'll ask, right? It's easy to say what the LNC stands for. It's a very different thing to say, how do you do that? One of the things I've noticed, especially in North Carolina, many of the candidates know I'm always trying to help y'all out. You come in, you want to run for office. Well, what do I have to do? What's the filing fee? How do I file? How do I qualify as a candidate? You know, we had a couple people that wanted to run and had missed the change in registration date by like 2 days. To support state affiliates, what the LNC can do very effectively, there are obviously things that they can do from the top down, broad messaging, you know, some good federal candidates, even if they might not win, messaging type candidates. But what I think is we need a central repository to hold off the shelf resources. So you want to run as a Libertarian, you go here, we will connect you with campaign managers, treasurers, other candidates to share war and horror stories. We can get you a website, we can get you a press release template, and if states want to take that and adopt it and make it more specific to the state, awesome. But the amount of time that our candidates and our affiliates spend organizing and figuring things out is time that could be spent talking to people, getting out there, knocking on doors, spreading the message, and that's a huge inefficiency. And the LNC very much has the power and resources to eliminate that efficiency and let us go do the work.
So in 2004, I became executive director of the Libertarian Party of Texas. Right before that, I volunteered for about 6 months and helped the LP Texas do a 80,000 signature petition drive. I drove across the state at my own expense and I had just sold a business, so I had time and money to do this. I was hired as executive director of LP Texas, and it was kind of a disaster to get started. Nobody answered the phone. There was a voicemail that people hadn't checked for 2 years. By 2006, I recruited 168 candidates to be on the ballot in Texas. We got 7 million votes, which was over half of all the votes for Libertarians in the entire nation that year. 2 years later, followed up with 173 candidates. I was a state activist, and I was very upset and disappointed with the National Libertarian Party because it seemed like they were incompetent and not helping my state or our state affiliates. It seemed like they were making things more difficult for us, often doing things like bad messaging, and they would send us this database. You know, we would get these spreadsheets emailed to us that had the membership database where our states are supposed to use that to contact them and raise money. And the emails, they were zigzagged throughout the spreadsheet. Instead of all the emails in one column, it's like they were in 5 different columns and phone numbers all mixed in there too. The National Party was not serving the state affiliates, and I was so mad, that's why I said, you guys need to hire me as executive director so I can fix all of these problems. I was brought in 2009. I had to twist arms to get the job. This is, you know, sometimes you quietly apply. This time I'm like, no, man, y'all are really sucking, and I did so good in Texas. You got to give me a chance. And if you don't, shame on you, and I'm telling everybody. So I was hired. We got monthly pledging up. We got fundraising up. I fixed that stupid emails in every different column thing. We upgraded the database. A couple years later, I took some time off, and then I was hired back in 2014. I helped, there was a guy who still complained about the National Party. Believe it or not, we had room to improve. This guy's name was Andy Burns. He was from Minnesota. He was always talking about how this National Party doesn't do anything, blah, 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 doesn't help our states. And so I said, you know what, Andy? You're hired. You're the state affiliate guy. It's your problem now. You need to fix all this and do all this work. What he did was he came up with this idea to set up databases for the state affiliates. We had a real good one at the national level that served our purposes. It did not help the state affiliates very much. And so he set up this Civi CRM, and it was very cheap for all states to get involved with it and have that as a service to provide at the state level. I used it myself years later as part of many different state parties. So I had access to the Pennsylvania one when we recruited 175 candidates that won their elections. Sorry, real quick, and I'll go shorter on the next one. The National Party, when I was there, when I first got there, they would sell bumper stickers for like $3, you know, $3 for one stupid bumper sticker. If you want 10, it was like $30 for 30 bumper stickers. The goal of the party is not to extract as much money out of you as it can, is to provide the best service and products for you so that you can be a better libertarian activist. So not long after, I set up a store where we're selling bumper stickers for 10 cents each. We're selling shirts at exactly what they cost us. We have these enough is enough vote libertarian signs at cost. In 2016, we sold $300,000, over 1 million products to help the Gary Johnson for President campaign. Go to the store now, lpstore.org. The prices are way up. They're selling almost nothing. There's no brochures. We had them at 10 cents. I know what the state affiliates need because I was a customer and I used to serve them well. As chair, I'll make sure we serve you guys well again. Thank you.
I'm going to harp on strategy and marketing. Our strategy has failed. There's less liberty now than there was in 1971. And you can't even say, well, Jim, it would be worse if we hadn't had the liberty. No, because there's a thing called crowding out. You crowd out good strategies with bad strategies. So what these state parties need is a winning strategy. That's direct citizen action. Pulling your kids out of government school, voting with your feet. I've designed an app to rank every county in the United States according to their level of freedom. Wouldn't that be great for the states to know which of their counties they could move to inside the state? I have developed an app to rank the freest county in each state. Wouldn't that be nice to know? Let's say you can't move out of your state, you're committed to the state. Where would you move? Our candidates should do direct action, which combines the old strategy with the new strategy that will actually, the only way to win in politics is to do direct action. We have to pull kids out of the schools so they're not brainwashed, so that when they become voters, they will look at the Libertarian Party. We need to teach economics. We need to teach the Second Amendment. Most people have no, I'm a Second Amendment lawyer, I've written 2 books about it. I'm the guy to do this because I can write that very simple explanation of why we have a Second Amendment. So our candidates can go out there and run, but also be engaging in direct action. Education is a form of direct action. So, and as far as marketing, the Libertarian Hall of Fame, how much is it going to cost? $25 million. That's expensive. If you think knowledge is expensive, try ignorance. Our country's falling apart. We have a $40 trillion debt, excuse me, it's not the deficit, it's the debt. So knowledge is expensive, but the money is out there. The Libertarian movement spends $500 million a year. And I'm not just calling out the Libertarian Party, I'm calling out the whole damn movement. What are we getting for this $500 million a year? The money's there. We need an international strategy conference. I don't think we've ever had one before. If we have, it didn't work, so we're gonna do it again. We need a marketing committee. And what is the logo of the Libertarian Party? I don't even know. But whatever it is, it's not working. We need a new logo. We gotta change things with a sense of urgency because this country is falling apart. And if you know people under 30, they are hurting. I'm gonna bring a sense of urgency to this mission.
All right. Go right back to you, Jim. On that, the Republican administration recently tried to run on anti-war candidates and whatnot, but simultaneously we know they're full of crap. So how would you position the LP to stand out and differentiate from the other political parties? Do you believe there's been significant damage to our credibility from the previous LNC? Or how do we prove to voters we want to offer something distinct? I know it's a big question. You know where I'm going.
Well, there were always two views of Trump within the Libertarian movement. Those that thought that Trump is a possibly positive development and those who did not think he was. I thought in the early years that given how horrible the George W. Bush Republican Party was, and I've written like 16 articles about that, I thought Trump really represented a potential for change. But I think what we know about MAGA is that along with Ronald Reagan, who was like supposedly our savior, along with the Tea Party movement that was supposedly promising change and failed, got co-opted, MAGA has failed. That's a fact. We could debate about what happened, but the fact is, this is actually, I mean, it's bad for the country that Trump failed, because we all live here. We all live here. We're living with the consequences of this idiotic war. I wrote a book about the Syrian-Libyan war. I know a little bit about the Middle East. But this is an opportunity for us. But to fill in that void and that gap that MAGA has left, and MAGA is falling apart, and we should take every opportunity to grab that support. But they're going to say, what's your strategy? They might not ask what our marketing is, but that's important too. Strategy and marketing, that's what needs to change. And if it doesn't change, we're all wasting our time, and it's just a feel-good social club.
So I think the question was,
Yeah.
Donald Trump ran, kind of sounded like he was anti-war, and then has there been damage to the reputation from the last LNC, something like that? Okay.
Essentially, some might see the Libertarian Party as having grafted on to the previous previous campaign. How would you differentiate the LP from other parties going forward?
Well, I think it's best if so there's some right libertarians and there's some left libertarians, and you guys like to fight a lot. I like to think of myself as a perfect libertarian, right in the middle, but probably you all think of yourselves as the perfect libertarian too. Regardless of all the details on policies or where you fall, I think it's helpful just strategically for us to be in the middle or equally distant from Republicans and Democrats. Whether you want to think about it on the diamond chart, and we're up here and they're equally far away, and try to avoid saying one of the two major parties is better than the other. If you start sounding like you're really favoring one over the other, then that kind of trains the voters to think, well, you know, I like y'all, and if y'all are saying this one's better, then maybe we should vote for that one. So I think libertarians need to be very distinctly different from Republicans and Democrats. Don't worry whether a Republican or Democrat's going to win the next election. Even if one of them's better than the other, and you know it, and maybe everybody knows it, that still doesn't matter, because for the long term, we need to build a bigger, more successful party, and we need voters to get in the habit of voting Libertarian time after time after time. A lot of our states have recruited a lot of candidates, and I think follow that. North Carolina's done a great job. When I see that Rob has run for office multiple times, that's great. I love that. When he ran for mayor of Charlotte or something, and some other stuff. I like what he's doing. I like folks that run for office. I know not everyone's willing to do it. You know, the first time I did that, I was scared to death. And I only did it because someone asked me. But we need to be distinct. As far as the anti-war issue, I'm anti-war. We need to stay out of those battles. It's not for us to get involved in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's not for us to get involved in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. It's not for us to bomb Iran, of course. In 2006, or I'm sorry, this was 2008, I put forward a resolution when I was serving on the LNC to say it's time for the Libertarian Party to endorse getting out of Iraq and Afghanistan immediately without delay. We had no business being there, and it's time to get out. Just before that, the party was kind of getting, maybe we have to fight terrorism. You know, I had trouble getting anti-war stuff out of the party. It was a priority for me. I pushed that and I got it out there. A few years before that, there was something called an Iraq exit strategy, where they were talking about getting out over time and stationing military around Iraq. It caused a lot of conflict within the party. I ended that by saying, we are anti-war, we need to get out immediately without delay, and now the Libertarian Party is anti-war again. Thank you.
So I don't think the party's damaged or tarnished. I don't think our brand is in any way diminished. I think the core issue we're facing really is a messaging problem, and I think the reason is that we're having an identity crisis. So I personally reject the notion of a right libertarian or a left libertarian. There's libertarians. That's the politics of it. And whatever your personal philosophy is, cool. But there should be no divide. If you all have not watched Spike Cohen's speech from the Reno convention, I watch it once every few weeks. Spike's a great speaker. It's great to watch, but he warns against the party becoming a duopoly, and we didn't listen. And there's a reason for that. Politicians at the top are incentivized to turn people against each other, because if we're fighting with each other, we're not paying attention to what they're doing. So you go up to almost anyone on the street, you say, what do you think of the government? They got bad things to say. Then they go and vote for that same government. Our two most successful messengers, I would argue, I think in the last 20, 25 years, Ron Paul and Gary Johnson, right? I mean, maybe you can think of some others, but just in terms of getting the message out to everyday normies, if you will. And the reason is they had accessible, digestible, still bold libertarian messaging, but messaging that people could understand. I apologize if you've heard this story before, because I've told it with our wonderful governor candidate, Mike Ross's campaign, but it's like 4 years ago, and my daughter was starting high school, and she had a little welcoming thing at this roller skating rink, and I was chaperoning. So they're all out roller skating, and I was sitting next to a black family. And I've long held that the two groups that I cannot understand why they're not all libertarian are black people and Native Americans. Because the government has wronged them more extensively to the most absurd degree than any other group in American history, I think. So I turned to, there was 7 women were sitting there, and I said, do you mind if I ask you a question? You know, not trying to get you to sign up for anything. Have you ever heard of a libertarian? And only 3 of them had even heard of it. And they were like, isn't that, one was like, oh, you're like sovereign citizens, and one was like, oh, aren't you like the weird Republicans? So we chatted for a while, exchanged information with them, and of those 7, 6 wrote me a couple of years ago, we stayed in touch and said they voted for Mike. But they'd never heard of a libertarian. We go out with what we think is bold messaging. We're not considering who that messaging is going to. You know, we're targeting urban groups with stuff about farms, and we're targeting farms with stuff about, or farmers with stuff about urban groups. And it goes extensively. We need bold libertarian messaging that is focused. We need to understand our identity is freedom, it's liberty, it's rights for everybody that the state shall not infringe on in any way. And if we can get that messaging out, then our brand will be just as beautiful as it was when it was first conceived.
All right, you mentioned Spike Cohen's comment about not being a duopoly. It's not a secret, but there are basically a duopoly inside the Libertarian Party. So, our party is filled with anarchists, minarchists, classic liberals, you know, maybe one faction versus the other faction. How will you try to move past those so we're actually messaging to the voters instead of fighting with ourselves?
Alright, so y'all can make fun of me about this later, I know Mac will, but for a long time, one of my guilty pleasures, I loved the show Married at First Sight. And this was a show where a panel of experts would pick a couple and they would meet at the altar and they would get married and then they would see if they could make it work. And I was fascinated. One, who the hell would choose to do that? But what is sort of the psychology behind it? What does it work? And so when I was working at Bank of America, Pastor Cal, who was one of the experts, gave a speech and I got to talk to him afterwards. And he said something interesting. He said, 50% of marriages fail, love marriages. 90% of arranged marriages succeed. Even when you adjust for sort of, you know, very anti-women laws in countries where, or cultures where arranged marriages look at differently, it only goes down to 80%. And he said the reason is, in an arranged marriage you have a goal. We want to hit these financial targets, we want to raise kids this way, we want our kids to turn out like this, whereas when you just meet someone, you're working towards getting married, and once you get married, you have nowhere to go. That's very similar to what the party has allowed itself to become. Instead of having clear, concise goals, key performance indicators and metrics along the way, we just have platitudes. We have memes, we have trolling, and make no mistake, I love those things. But we don't have the goals to go with it. And the few goals that we do have, they're not concrete, we're not articulating them well. To move past any divide between or ideology that divides libertarians, we need to refocus on goals, and we need to bring back some success. Success breeds success. Just hitting a few goals, some big fundraising numbers, some successful high-profile candidate runs, and then promoting the things that we've done. There's a lot more libertarians elected around the country than we realize, but how many people know it? Because we don't do a great job of getting it out there. We need to inspire people. We need to refocus on goals and on things that we can achieve step by step, and then you will see this anxiety that turns into fear and then hate and anger and bad at each other. It'll just dissipate. And I have my friend Free sitting over there in the audience, check his game show out, but he told me something last night that I loved it. I hadn't thought about it, but he was talking to another friend who's a classical liberal. Free's an anarchist. And he was like, I will fight with you until we get to the point where we're a classical liberal, then we walk different directions. I want that day to come so badly. So let's work towards things we can achieve. The ideological divide will fall aside, and then when we really can have a fight about anarchy versus minarchy, I think everyone in this room will be pretty happy.
So yeah, we need to stop fighting. Do any of y'all have children? Anybody raised any children? So if you tell them to stop fighting, they stop, right? I have one 11-year-old son. I tell him to stop fighting, and he doesn't even stop fighting. It just doesn't. People are going to do what they're going to do. We kind of have to accept it. There's going to be various kinds of libertarians, and they're going to argue over who's better and who's not. And it's just always been that way. You know, we had the Mises Caucus that came, and they're very clearly a right-leaning group that was trying to influence the Libertarian Party, and they caused a lot of conflict. Well, we've had socialist libertarians come in and do that. When I was in Texas, the Tea Party was just getting in, and some of the Tea Parties would come to the Libertarian Party and say, we need to be more conservative and get you guys down. It's just that factionalism and groups are always going to come and go in the Libertarian Party, and it really can't be stopped. And it happens all the time in the Republicans and Democrats. MAGA versus not MAGA, the super progressives like AOC versus the more conservative traditional Democrats. You don't have to, you can join in the fighting or you can fight for your side, but you can also decide you're not going to fight and not waste your time on that stuff and get other things done. And you know, that was my original thing when at that 2022 Reno convention. I was like, I'm not even going to be a delegate. It looks like there's going to be a big war, and I'm just going to go and maybe sell some t-shirts, and I'm going to let them fight with each other, and when they're done fighting, I'm going to work with whoever's left to help continue growing the Libertarian Party. I'm not saying that's always the right thing to do. We do need to discuss, debate, and fight over what's right for the Libertarian Party and the right way to go, but you don't have to be totally constrained by that. I formed the Libertarian Booster Pack in Texas because now I could work with donors and people who work with my PAC, and I wasn't subject to control by the Libertarian Party of Texas. I could independently recruit Libertarian candidates. So I wasn't anti-Libertarian Party of Texas, it was just a separate thing, but it wasn't designed to take over the party, it was designed to boost the party. That's why I call it the Libertarian Booster Pack, because I'm going to boost people. It worked well in Texas, and I started reaching out to Virginia, and the Libertarian Booster Pack recruited 6 candidates in Virginia. I actually went out there and petitioned for them. We helped recruit 17 in Arkansas, 17 in Mississippi, 57 in Arkansas, and like 67 in Alabama, and again, 175 or 174 in Pennsylvania. I did all of that from Austin, Texas, except for that brief visit to Virginia. Obviously, I wasn't on the boards in those other states. You can make stuff happen. Don't waste your time on infighting. You can't stop it. It's going to happen. Just get stuff done. Thank you.
Sometimes it's good to be old, because you were there. I got in the movement in '79, and there was this split around 1980, the Ed Clark campaign. And then at the 1983 convention, the one side walked out, the Cato people walked out, and for want of a better word, the Rothbardians won that. So this movement's been divided since 1983. And that has to end. And I'm not naive, I'm not pie in the sky, I understand human nature. But I think I have a unique background in this, because I'm affiliated with the Mises Institute. I wrote Cato's, I think, their best-selling paper I wrote at that time on drug policy. So I've worked for David Bose. I know Lou Rockwell. I knew Rothbard. I've been associated with almost every major libertarian institution. And I think I can bring this movement together. Why? What's the unifying principle? How about winning? You know, our ancestors won the American Revolution. And in my book, Progressivism, a Primer, I list about 15 major accomplishments of these people, including the Bill of Rights. They were winners. The last libertarian who got elected, elected president was Grover Cleveland from my hometown in Buffalo. Like, we need to win. Winning brings people together. When you lose because you have a losing strategy, it divides people because everybody's looking for scapegoats. Again, it's human nature. Who are we going to blame for this or that or the other thing? Well, you tried this and it didn't work. Well, I know, but the strategy was bad. So if we change our strategy, we can start winning. Winning will bring people together. Now, specifically on direct action, for example, voting with your feet. Libertarians don't argue about voting with your feet. We argue about who the candidate's going to be, who the chair is going to be, strategy. We argue about those 2 or 3 issues that all libertarians have been fighting about for 50 years, and nobody's ever going to change anybody's mind. But if we go to direct action, that's something we can all agree on. We should all pull our kids out of government school. Is anybody in the movement going to oppose that? They might want to get another movement, frankly, to be honest, as the author of the book, Government Schools Are Bad for Your Kids. Voting with your feet. Real quick, one of my ideas is teaching jury activism. Did you know that Tucker Carlson and Joe Kent were recently threatened with indictment because of free speech? What I want to do at the county level is train people in their rights as grand jurors. We all know about jury nullification, trial jury. Grand juries have tremendous power, and we should be instructing citizens so that when they go after people like Tucker and Joe Kent and anybody else who's penalized for free speech, they will not indict those people. So those types of direct action strategies, which libertarians cannot possibly disagree with, those will bring us together and we will win, and winning is a great unifier.
Is it my turn?
I think it's time for a new question, isn't it?
Is it my question?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
All right, you're messing
I'm
me
on
up.
the hot seat again.
All right. We have enough time for probably this question and then a closing, so just keep that in mind. And it'll be an easy one. If you keep this one short, we can take one or two questions from the audience. But this is a hard one, Rob. Do you really want to take questions? The question I'm going to ask is basically the donor burnout is a real thing. There's a lot of donors that are not happy with the party, and it's not going to be solved just by sending a couple extra emails saying urgent donate now. What exactly is your fundraising experience, and how can that apply to the national party to try and increase our revenue?
Well, I did ask a Wall Street guy for $150,000 once, and he said, "I'll give you $75,000." So I've been in the room with the Koch brothers. I've been in the room with centimillionaires. That was 30 years ago. I think I'm hopefully a little smoother, sharper guy now than I was then. So I could talk to those people, but really, the money's there. But rich people are not stupid. They want something that's going to work, or which has a high probability of working. And these ideas that I'm talking about will work, and I have no problem asking some centimillionaire for $1 million as seed money to start a Libertarian Hall of Fame, so people will not be confused about what the word libertarian is. What's a libertarian? Oh, I didn't know Thoreau was a libertarian. I didn't know H.L. Mencken was a libertarian. I didn't know Mark Twain was a libertarian. These are good ideas. If you give rich people good ideas, they will part with their money.
When I was first hired as the National Executive Director, my primary number one thing was to get the monthly pledge revenue up. And so I got the list of people who had dropped off and started calling them and asking them to sign up for monthly pledges. And some of them would give me their credit card, some would tell me why they're upset with the party, and some would say, well, I kind of think I know who you are, but I'm not going to donate, I'll just go do it online. And you know what? Our online system had been discontinued. You couldn't donate to a monthly pledge online because somehow somebody before I got there decided that wasn't necessary. And so instantly I said, that is stupid. We have to fix that so people can donate online. I quickly brought the monthly pledges from under 20,000 to up to over 30,000 a month at the National Party. Raised well over $1 million most years, over $2 million 1 year as National Executive Director. I was always able to get money in when I needed to. One time I visited a guy in Austin and said I wanted to get $400,000 for the Libertarian Booster PAC and the Libertarian Action Super PAC. That was in 2012. And he gave me that money, $400,000. The Libertarian Booster PAC raises over $100,000 a year, every year, and has been for many years. People know I was at the National Executive Director position, and the party worked well. It wasn't perfect. I'm not perfect. I don't always have the right thing to say. Sometimes I get mad and insult someone and I shouldn't have done that, and then they stop donating and I'm like, yeah, I shouldn't have said that or I shouldn't have done that. But people know things worked pretty well when I was there, and I think a lot of former donors will come back when they see that I'm chair and I'm going to make sure things run reasonably well. So I hope you'll consider voting for me, Wes Benedict, if you're going to Grand Rapids. Thank you.
So people don't give you money for nothing. I mean, maybe a few, and if you find some, introduce them, please. But in the last election, the last presidential election, the total spend was something like $14 billion. They're not buying nothing with that. One fact that has always just boggled my mind, in 2018, the biggest donor to Greenpeace for their anti-nuclear lobby was ExxonMobil. We are not selling power, we're selling freedom. But a lot of the people with money want power so that they can advance their interests. So the crux of our problem is, how do we break through that? We have to offer something. And I think there are 3 ways. 1, you just need general broad fundraising all the time, stuff in newsletters. 2, you need specific events where you can raise money. You asked about my experience. What are we up to, Ryan? Like 15,000 raised. I mean, granted, we're spending some of it too, but making money just on this convention. I'm pretty proud. My polar plunge idea is going to make us $1,100 in 30 seconds. So, and then 3, you need coordinated campaigns. Hey, we want to get 50 candidates elected for 50 years of being in business, and here's how you can contribute. I will also say that my personal experience and expertise is in marketing, communications, and strategy. So I can help coordinate the plans. I can certainly do the promotion and the organization, but I'd also bring in people who are professional fundraisers. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I'm a professional fundraiser, but you gotta spend money to make money sometimes, and if we bring in professional fundraisers along with these targeted ideas, we will see the coffers full.
Rob, we started with you, so I know there's one question. We don't have time for the one question, even though it's a short question. It is currently 1:13, so I start with you on intro, right? So Jim, do you want to start outros? Just take 3-4 minutes, tell them everyone where you are and all that stuff.
So I got into this because of people like Harry Brown, Ralph Raico, Roy Childs, Rothbard, many others. When I was a young libertarian, I felt bad for these old guys, and I said, boy, you're not going to be around when we win. Now I'm the old guy who's not going to be around. That's why I'm doing this. We have to turn this around. It's not funny anymore. The country is literally falling apart. Young people are suffering. They don't have money to get married. They don't have money to buy a house. They don't have money to have kids. There's not going to be a future. We have to have a sense of urgency about this. And that's why I sat down. I don't have time to go through it. I have 28 new ideas to turn this thing around so we can start winning and make the Libertarian Party a player in American life. Forget politics. We're going to be a player in American life if we lead the way with the voting with your feet, taking your kids out of the schools, voting with your health, teaching grand jury and trial jury activism, teaching economics. These things will work if they're tried. I urge you to look at the memo on Facebook and Twitter. One thing I'll close on, maybe 30 seconds. I haven't even talked about one of my memos, which is in the 19 pages. Who is the most loyal voting base been for the Libertarian Party in 50 years? Rural voters. What's the Libertarian Party's rural strategy? Don't have one. Now we do. It has 13 different elements. Rural people need us because they're under threat. Somebody's going to grab all that land. And we certainly need them. And so we need new strategies and tactics. It's a detailed rural strategy to go after eminent domain and go after green subsidies, which are leading to the tearing up of farmland. We need to unite with farmers. The only way we're going to get out of this health mess is to get farm to table and eliminate the regulations that prevent farmers from selling healthy food to Americans. So lots of ideas, check them out. Thanks for allowing me to be here today.
Thank you. Jim talked about a Hall of Liberty and that we should build, and I just want to point out that the National Libertarian Party bought an office in Alexandria, Virginia in, I think it was 2014. That building cost $850,000, and we did a lot of promotion for it, raised money for it, and we honored big donors to it. Like some of the rooms, if you donated $25,000, we put a plaque to recognize them. And one of our donors wanted to recognize Henry David Thoreau instead of himself, and so we did something for Henry David Thoreau. And another donor wanted to recognize the world's smallest political quiz instead of himself, and so we had that in there. The building cost $850,000, and it was paid off, and it was paid off a little bit after I left. Go by 3 or 4 years pass, and the folks in charge of the Libertarian Party let the air conditioner up on the roof start leaking. They also got rid of all the staff, so nobody was in the building. So it was an empty building, nobody in it. There was no more staff. They had a few remote staff. The air conditioner's leaking. It caused over $200,000 of damage, and they sold the building a few months ago for $600,000 when we know we've had inflation and real estate is up in most places. We don't have a bad strategy. We have good strategies. Sometimes we have incompetent administration, but good administration and activity works. Our strategy is to recruit as many candidates as we can, ones that can get elected and win and implement policies there, and ones that may not get elected, but they make a whole lot of noise and help educate the public on libertarian policies. The strategy works everywhere. I've done it in multiple states myself. I wrote the letters, I made the phone calls. I showed all those candidates how to fill out their campaign finance reports. I helped them fill them out. Many of them I gave signs. I called the state of Pennsylvania multiple times to answer the question, do you or do you not have to report your child's mortgage on the ethics disclosure form? I don't want every candidate to have to wonder that. I learned it myself, and now I can tell all 174 the answer to those questions that they're too scared to ask. Our strategy works where we run candidates like in North Carolina, which you guys have been doing. You know, if every state was like North Carolina, the National Libertarian Party as a total sum would be a whole lot better off. It works. When you run candidates, money comes in, more people find out about the Libertarian Party, more people start studying our philosophy and all this crazy economics we support, and more people and policies start changing. So I'm Wes Benedict. I'm running for chair of the Libertarian National Committee. I'd appreciate your support. I know a lot of you have put a lot of time and money and effort into helping the Libertarian Party or into being a candidate. There's some incompetent administration going on right now. Call the phone number, 202-333-0008. See what happens. 1-800-ELECT-US. Call the phone number the party's had for 30 years. The party had for 30 years. For months now, you get the message. This is welcome to Verizon Wireless. We're sorry, we cannot take your call right now. That is what the National Libertarian Party is delivering today. I can fix all that. I'm sorry, I'll let it happen. And I appreciate your support. Thank you.
So about a year after college, a year into my professional career, which is longer ago than I like to admit now, but my first job, I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I got put on the management track. And I went to take this management training course with this guy, Maury Kramer. And the rest of it has sort of blended in with a lot of other life, but I clearly remember the first thing he said, which was, if it's not your number one priority, it's not a priority. And you know, we saw that today. The priority was figure out a way to get power. While I don't exactly agree with what he said, I agree with the principle. If you're doing 1,000 things, then you're probably doing 1,000 things wrong. We need to be doing a few things right. One of the difficulties with politics is that you can't just do one thing. You can't run campaigns without money. You can't fundraise without campaigns. You can't have electoral success without messaging. You can't get messaging out without channels. You need publicity. So, and I'm not going to go into the details of it in the interest of time and boredom, but I will do a live stream on this in a couple of weeks. I put together a plan that I'm calling the 6 Pillars of Liberty. And there are very detailed ideas on how to achieve these things, along with key performance indicators and metrics we want to hit along the way. So one of my ideas, for example, you all remember a couple years ago, there's this thing called COVID. Does anyone remember when Jen Psaki would hold the press conferences and Peter Doocy would go on every day and ask one question, and it was just, that's what was making the rounds the next day? And it just struck me, like, why is there not a libertarian reporter in there? And I looked into it. It's not that difficult to get someone in there. And I've laid out the steps to do that. Another thing that we're really missing out on, some of the famous libertarians. Does anyone here know that Vince Vaughn is a libertarian, a fairly active libertarian in his local community? Why have we not connected with him and made publicity there? I have a plan to hold some big events around the country that we sponsor. Get some of the bands that follow us, some of these big names. A plan to fix IT so that our IT and our operations infrastructure starts working for us and for the state affiliates so they get something back. You know, is James in here? Yeah, I know how much you love all the database transfer stuff. What if we could make that easy? And then I want to promote people with good ideas. If you saw the video, Sean Kennedy, chair of the American Liberty Caucus, has written this guidebook on things we can do, especially for candidates. It's unbelievable. Everyone should be reading that. Every candidate should be reading that, but it's just not getting out there. And I'm not knocking the current LNC. I actually think Steve McKellar has done an admirable job with a difficult situation. But there's so much opportunity to go forward. And the best way to do that as LNC chair is to lead by example. And I recognize that I am speaking to a home crowd here, which is a little helpful in this regard, but I think y'all see how much I do, and I hope I lead by example a little bit. And I just plan to take that energy and do everything I can and inspire some people, and let's win this thing.
Thank you all for coming. Rob Yates, Wes Benedict, and Jim Ostrowski. I think I got it. All right, we are actually going to move to the gala hall for business because they have lights and air conditioning